afternoon to you and a warm welcome to this virtual event about how to spark rural innovation via connectivity. My name is Maeve McMahon. I come from Ireland, but I'm based here in Brussels where I work as a journalist. I'm delighted to be your host for this virtual discussion organised by EU40, that's the network of MEPs under 40. The European Parliament's RUMRA and Smart Villages Intergroup are also one of the co-organisers, and REINA, that's the Rural European Innovation Area powered by Startup Ole. Before I give you more details about what today's event is all about, let's take a look at this short video brought to us today by Vodafone and produced in Romania.
Nu avem nici semnal, trebuie să ies în dealul ăla sus acolo ca să pot vorbi și eu cu fiii mea.
Nici nu am telefon pentru că nu pot să-l folosesc. Semnal nu este, internet nu avem.
Dacă ar fi semnal bun, cum este la oraș, atunci aș vorbi cu copiii.
Ieșim 4-5 km să prindem un semnal și noi, sau ne urcăm pe un deal dacă prindem, dar nu prindem câteodată nici pe dealuri.
Dacă am avea internet aici în sat, ar fi și copiii noștri în rând cu lumea.
Poate că nu i-am mai vedea plecați.
Băiatul meu s-a chinuit foarte mult cu școala online. Neavând internet în sat, merge la soacra mea pentru a face lecțiile de acolo. În fiecare zi 10 km.
A fost foarte greu fără internet, mai ales pentru cei mici să învețe literele, dar noroc că avem niște părinți dedicați la noi în comună.
Dragii mei, ne-am adunat aici pentru că am scris o scrisoare către domnul primar al comunei Izverna să o trimită la Vodafone.
Stimați domni și doamne de la Vodafone, noi cei din satele Drăghești, Cernavârf și Busești vă rugăm să aduceți internetul și la noi.
E superbă zona, dar complet deconectat. Am săpat în piatră. Am tras 21 de kilometri de fibră optică pentru rețeaua fixă. Am instalat 18 echipamente optice și 70 de amplificatoare de semnal. Am montat o antenă ca să conectăm 300 de gospodării din satele Cernavârf, Busești și Drăghești la internet de mare viteză, fix și mobil. Am adus rețeaua acolo unde nu era noi.
Misiunea noastră este să nu lăsăm pe nimeni în urmă, să ducem tehnologia, internetul și posibilitatea de comunicare acolo unde este mare nevoie de el.
Dacă putem.
Rural Action Plan, a plan that was presented back in the summer in July by a number of European commissioners here in Brussels. It's all about, of course, the topic of today's discussion, which is connectivity to spark rural innovation. And to dig into this topic a little bit more, we're joined by a number of brilliant panelists. So we're delighted to say good morning and hello to Mariya de Graça Carvalho, Portuguese member of the European Parliament for the Socialist Group. Good morning. Good to have you with us. We're also going to be joined today by Isidro Laso Ballesteros. He's a senior member of the Cabinet of the European Commissioner for Innovation and Education. That's Mariya, Gabriel. We'll also be heading over to Leitrim to speak to the Irish councillor Enda Stenson. He's the Rapporteur for the Revitalisation of rural areas through smart villages. So today he's representing the European Committee of the Region. So lovely to have you with us there, Enda.
Thank you very much.
We'll also be speaking to Vodafone, to Reinhard Cllr. He's the Group Public Policy Development Director at the Vodafone Group. Reinhard, lovely to have you and your perspective as well with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And for a take on working every day on the ground in rural Europe, we're going to bring in Sandra Isabel Novo. She is the founder and the CEO of Market Sustainable Startup. That's a digital network of SMEs in the organic agri-food sector. And I believe you're joining us today from Asturias. Sandra, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Maeve.
Beautiful, beautiful part of Europe as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
to all our panelists for being with us today, and thank you for watching. We, of course, want to know what you think of this rural strategy. And if, for example, as well, you've gone rural, you've moved out of the city since the pandemic, anything you want to say today in this panel, just drop your comments, your questions underneath the YouTube video, and we'll bring them in as we go along. But let's kick off and invite first our representative from the Commission, if he's with us, Isidro, to tell us more about this long vision for rural areas. And do we have Isidro? Okay, while we wait to get Isidro, I would like to bring in Enda. Because Enda, before we went on here, you told us that you had to travel a couple of miles in order to get internet, that you don't even have internet, proper broadband in your house. Tell us about the situation and how on earth can you do your job without this?
Well, I am a member of the local authority here in Leitrim, elected in '99. Then I was appointed to the Committee of the Regions in 2014, of which I'm now an alternate member, and I was the rapporteur for the rural areas and smart villages. And we did a lot of work, but just from my own area point of view, we do not have the broadband necessary. We're online all the time. I know that there is fibre optic cable supposed to be rolled out right across the country, but 80% of my county has no broadband. And it never was felt more than right throughout the pandemic, when everybody was working from home, nobody could go. But a lot of people and a lot of children in my area were disadvantaged because of no connectivity. And that is probably one of the biggest issues. As I said when I was speaking to you earlier, like, I am a child of the 60s, and I remember when rural electrification was brought across the country, and people and men with horses and poles and wires brought the rural electrification into every rural house across the country. And that was done over probably a 2 to 3 year period. I, for the life of me, can't understand. The poles are in place now, everything is in place, but it's not been rolled out. We're being told, and it's gone back for 10 years. I know it's held up for small, silly reasons. Politics got in the way, but it's a huge deficit in this part of the country, and it's badly needed, because we know that throughout the pandemic, this was probably one of the safest areas that anybody could live or reside, because we were out in rural areas, we were out in the open, and that's where people wanted to be. But connectivity is huge, and it's not improving. And I'm not being critical of governments or Europe or whatever. I'm just making the point as it is, that we don't have what is needed to live there.
You're just telling the truth how it is every day, and
yes,
in your day-to-day life there in Leitrim. Beautiful part of the west of Ireland there. Now,
yes.
You mentioned that politics got in the way. Now, we don't have an Irish politician on the panel to
No,
address those issues, and we don't want to get bogged down with domestic issues either. Enda, we do have Vodafone. We do have Reinald Kruger here on the panel. He might be able to address this issue, because, of course, Reinald is just one example of somebody in Leitrim, but, take a look across the continent, and there's people with similar issues who are so frustrated, and they just can't get online. So what role are you playing here to make sure that they get connected?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing me in. What Enda says is a really good example that rural areas are where we see the digital divide most starkly. And it was brought into sharp relief by the pandemic, as we all know. Those with reliable high-speed connections were better positioned to minimize what they experienced in terms of social isolation, interruption to their work, and access education. For rural areas, as we know, giga networks are the critical infrastructure. With gigabit networks, we will provide the opportunities to create new jobs, to improve the productivity, and to address what Enda has mentioned. And I think we wanted to listen to a representative from the Commission, but we in Vodafone, we're very much behind what Commission President von der Leyen has said in her State of the European Union address. It is unacceptable that 40% of people in rural areas still do not have access to fast broadband connection. So that is something we really have to address together. We have commissioned, or the Vodafone Institute has commissioned recently, a survey by Cllr who ask what are the preconditions for life at the countryside, and guess what? The number one precondition that was mentioned was, and by far the number one, was good internet connection. Reliable internet was deemed by those who submitted to this survey to be more important than a hospital or a rail link. So you see how much connectivity has been at the forefront of people, in particular during the pandemic. And the connectivity has been a lifeline for people and businesses throughout the pandemic. And many of us have learned that in our own way. But at the same time, while it was a lifeline, it was also a divider, because where we didn't have a connectivity, that has unfortunately amplified the technological and skills divide between rural and urban populations. And rural areas are home to 1/3 of EU citizens, so this is not to be neglected. So coming to your question, addressing these gaps will require substantial resources, and this can not only be by private investment, because often, as we know, in rural areas, the business case is very difficult. So public authorities, private investors like us have to work closely together. And we think that policies are being developed at the moment to enable this, to provide a framework for this, in order to enhance the rural connectivity. But I would like to stress that as a priority, of course, public and private investment is needed together in order to accelerate connectivity and to accelerate the deployment of 5G in particular. We have seen the example from Romania. But secondly, it must be also coupled with reforms at the policy front. For example, we need to roll out 5G. We need to have investment-friendly spectrum auctions. I can go into more detail later on.
No, I'm gonna stop you there, Reinhold. I'm gonna stop you there because yeah, you touched on a couple of points there that we'll come back to later. But now we are joined by Isidro, and Isidro Ballesteros is a senior member of the cabinet of the Commissioner for Innovation and Education, Mariya Gabriel. So he's an absolute expert. He knows all the ins and outs and the details of this rural strategy that was presented back in July by a number of commissioners here in Brussels. So I want to bring him in now and then, of course, get our take from our MEP. So Isidro, thank you so much for joining us. And can you just enlighten us and our viewers about this rural strategy, and also address what Enda said at the start, that he in Leitrim had to drive a couple of kilometres away in order to get good connection to be with us here live for this virtual event.
Thank you very much, Mariya, for the introduction. Indeed, in the Commission, we launched at the end of June the long-term vision for rural areas, and one of the flagships is rural innovation. And another one is connectivity, but both go hand in hand. The prerequisite of having rural innovation is to have connectivity. You have no connectivity, no way to have any other thing. So we made several pilot projects of something that we are calling a startup village, that is not focused on connectivity, it's focused more on creating new businesses in rural areas, in the small villages. And one of the things that we learned certainly was that the connectivity was the number one issue. There were other issues as well, like accommodation for the entrepreneurs or the many times engineers who are normally high paid, that they were not able to find accommodation in the villages. And what we were tackling is one of the problems at the time. When we tackled the issue of connectivity, we talked to the operators, telecom operators, to bring a fiber to that pilot project. Was not possible because the planning was done every year with the region, and that village was not included there. And then for the next year, etc., etc. And then, of course, we could not wait. So we started working with small players who are using other type of technologies, but are also reliable, because the request that we were getting from the entrepreneurs, in this case was a fintech, coming from Estonia to a small village in northern Spain, 250 inhabitants, and he was moving the fintech from Estonia there. He said, the number one priority for me is reliability, because we were trying to precisely with Vodafone to have access to the cloud. He had the cloud in Ireland, and he said, okay, 4G is good enough for me for the normal world, let's say, but it's not reliable enough for me. So I cannot rely on 4G on 5G to have the full business in this small village. And then we found a solution, as I said, through a small operator that was bringing us via radio waves and some repeaters in the hills between the city and this village. And this was a good solution, good enough for the entrepreneur. Of course, it would have been better to have fiber. The fiber was actually going to the center of the village, and it's in a box. The box, there was no business for the telecom operators in Spain to do the fiber to the home from this box. So then we found a solution there. So we learned a lot of things with this Startup Villages pilot, and that's why, as you see in the long-term vision for rural areas, there is an initiative, a flagship initiative called Startup Villages Forum. The launch will be on the 16th of November with 4 commissioners, Commissioner Gabriel, Commissioner Wojciechowski, Commissioner Ferreira, and Vice President Suiza, the President of the European Parliament, and the President of the Committee of the Regions. And we want to, and there will be also some presidents on some regions, and we want to encourage more and more regions to help their villages, not only to have connectivity, that I said this is the minimum, but also to attract new businesses to the villages. And this is one of the big things that we are going to do, as I said, in 1 month and 3 days.
Okay, perfect, Isidro. So maybe Enda can get involved in that as well, and you can do a case study over in Leitrim, because I think that certainly should be somewhere that you should prioritize. Now let's bring in our MEP, Mariya Carvalho. Thank you so much for being with us today. You've been listening along to everything, and I guess you're probably questioning as well, why is the Commission only coming out with this rural strategy only now in 2021, and do you think it's going to work in reality?
So good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think that in spite of the fact that the Commission only come with the strategy now, there is a lot of other initiatives that have been going on. And in fact, in order to have the crucial access and connectivity that is crucial for rural areas, because as it has been said, only through connectivity you can attract business, create jobs, to attract and to retain professionals, young people. So it's really crucial that we have Europe covered and all connected. And there are some initiatives that are going on. We need investment, as it has been said. We need infrastructures, and we need education and skills. Europe needs education and skills to have specialists in the area, because we are lacking specialists, but also to the general population, young and older population. We need to give the capacity to use these skills. These are the essential for the rural areas. After, we also need to continue to do the research and technological development that is so crucial for the digital transformation, and the everything related with data, how to store the data and how to gather the data, how to have access to data. So all that needs to be done, and a lot of initiatives are going on in all these topics. And mainly, the next 3-4 years will be essential for this transformation, because we have the resilience and recovery plan. That is an impressive amount, impressive budget, and 20% needs to be devoted to digital. So we hope that this is going to be followed by the member states, because we know in the end there is the decision of the Commission and the Parliament, but the member states now will manage the budget and they will implement the project. So we really pledge the member states that they will apply well this budget, because we will not have another opportunity. So at least to have every part of Europe connect will be very important. And when we end up of applying the resilience and recovery facility, at least that should be. But we need to be in certain way, everyone, members of parliament, the business community and the population, quite vigilant about the application of this budget, because sometimes there are big promises that is going to be on skills, on digital, on innovation research, and we end up that local politicians and politicians in general spend in some other areas that are probably easier to execute, like big roads and things like that. We have some examples in my own country, and do not apply in more intangible things that are so important for the rural areas, like it is the connectivity, because you cannot see like you see a road or something else. So it's very important these 3-4 years that there is a big investment on the connectivity of rural areas and also on skills and education. I have been still going on. We will vote in plenary, next plenary, rapporteur of the public-private partnerships. That is a very important model, as it was said by Mr. Cllr. And there is more for the development of the future. There is a public-private partnership on the key digital technologies, so the key digital technology of the future. There is another one on 5G and preparing all the research and the technology for the 6G. And it's very interesting because in my own country, I have been visiting places and explain my work, my reports of the 5G and 6G, and in a very small place near the border to Spain, and they say, but deputada, we for us is enough 2G. We don't have any.
That's what I was going to
so
say.
I explained about 6G and said, please give us.
People will start rolling their eyes to heaven if you start talking about 6G. Yeah, and they can't even connect to send an email. Mariya Graça Carvalho, Portuguese MEP there from the Socialist Party, just telling us how...
No, I'm from the European People's Party.
Sorry. Telling us the importance of the next couple of years when it comes to rolling out this rural strategy and making sure that local politicians and national politicians, of course, get on board. And listening along to the last couple of interventions was Sandra Isabel Novo. She is a CEO and a founder of a startup over in the Basque Country in the north of Spain, in Asturias. So I guess my question to you this afternoon is, are your needs addressed in this rural strategy?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be here, and good morning to everyone, to all the participants. The topic is really very important for us, as we are working on a daily basis with small businesses in agri-food sector. Most of them are located in rural areas, and of course, what all the panelists are mentioning is that it's a starting point. We really need to get connectivity to those rural areas, because as it was mentioned by Mr. Stenson and other participants, there are different areas where you have to travel, if it's 10 kilometers or even more, to get perhaps one line in your phone to send a WhatsApp. And we have seen this with some of the businesses participating in our platforms in rural and mountainous areas where it's challenging for them to even open an email. So of course, connectivity first step. Perhaps I would like to share a little bit what we are doing and how we had to adopt our approach with rural SMEs, because Sostenibles, as you mentioned, is a network, is a digital network for small businesses in the agri-food sector. We are based in Spain, and we began our work in 2018. At first, our focus was to foster the connection between small businesses in the sector. As you know, now 9 out of 10 businesses in agri-food are small, and there's a lot of opportunities for them to connect and make business together. Here we found one of the first issues, which was that our platform needed to be very lightweight for people to engage, because what we saw is that small businesses in the sector are really keen and are aware of the need to transform digitally and are willing to do so, but there is the need to provide some dedicated support to them. Our network began in mid-2018, and a year later we counted on a network of over 100, and I would say of the most innovative and small producers and farmers in Spain. And you know, if this need was evident for them, the need to go digital, with as it was mentioned during COVID pandemic, it became totally clear. You know, before we went onto our network to see what were the main challenges they were facing during the COVID pandemic, and unanimously it was the lack of market access. They were left behind of larger supply chains, and their sales channels were closed. And they desperately needed to find ways to sell their products. Some were using up, some other, you know, more informal means, but there was this need and the realization of these businesses that they really needed to go digital, or they will be, you know, left behind of this digital revolution. And so there we began our flagship project, which is Market Sostenibles, by which we built, as of today, we have built two marketplace platforms, for SMEs. So we're working directly with small producers to offer them a turnkey solution. So we offer them their dedicated shop in our platform, so they can sell directly both to end customers and to you know, professional customers such as restaurants, hospitality. What we saw is that we really needed to provide this turnkey solution. So we needed to, you know, give them all done because of this connectivity issue as well. Because it's, you know, it's a lot of connection what you need to put on, you know, your product, your catalog, and everything. So we needed to provide this dedicated assistance, and also make sure that our platform and the way for producers to communicate, to get the notifications, was also very lightweight. You know, was very lightweight emails and so forth. So you know, what we've learned is that there's this willingness, but also you have to use this bottom-up approach. You have to go on the field and research and identify the particular needs of the participants, and modify the you know, the solutions, because depending on the area, on the and on the sector, it might be very different. So I think one of the key takes for us is this one. And as well, we've met during this journey, we've met some amazing and really innovative SMEs. Just to give you a couple of examples, there are some like using algae or bacteria to reduce carbon emissions, to reduce methane emissions. Some are applying circular models. So there's of innovation already happening. But I think what would be very, very important would be to be able to also connect these issues and to act as loudspeakers of these good practices. So I think Reina is such a good idea as well, because it's a platform where we can, you know, bring visibility to good practices and to innovations that are easily applicable to other SMEs as well. So perhaps I could go into more detail afterwards. I don't want
maybe
to...
a little bit later. You can take a pause there, because I really want to go back to Leitrim, and I really want to bring Enda back in there, because I remember back in July when the European Commissioner from Portugal was presenting this strategy. She said that neglecting rural Europe would bring about, quote, a geography of discontent. So I want to ask you, do you feel that in Leitrim, among people there, do you feel like they feel they're being left behind by policymakers? Do you think that their needs will be addressed in this strategy?
No, well, I absolutely feel that we have been left behind. Of that there is no doubt. There has been, what we do need is a rural agenda that will match the urban agenda. And if that doesn't happen sooner rather than later, and I know there's wonderful ideas here, and everybody I have no doubt is doing their best, but rural areas have been neglected. Of that, there is no doubt. We cannot, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Rural areas have been neglected, and we have got to sooner rather than later, because the one cap doesn't fit everything. We've got every place is different, even parts of Ireland. And there's some very good, as has been said about other areas, innovative places and innovative towns that have been done. And in parts of Ireland, that is correct. But in the west of Ireland, we live in the northwest region, and that is now deemed a region in transition. I would even say that it's a region in decline at this stage. And if Europe, and I do commend Europe for a lot of the things to do, but they have got to be more seen on the ground. If something very good happens in Ireland, let me tell you this, governments and national government will take full credit for this. Europe is never mentioned. If something goes wrong, like if we're not allowed to build a rural house, oh, well, that's a directive coming from the European Commission or whatever. That has got to change. There has got to be more coming together between national governments and Europe. Funding was also mentioned. We are not in a position to fund the connectivity in parts of rural Leitrim or where I am at the moment. We have got to get help from Europe, and that has got to come through a proper rural agenda. And that is, and if we don't see that, we're going to leave huge swathes of Europe behind us. That'll be a forgotten, be an overgrown mass that'll be there for the birds and the bees, but places that we live in will be soon forgotten, and that would be extremely sad. And I cannot emphasize that strong enough to anybody who is listening. And we have got to get to work on that. And it's going to take, yes, it's going to take funding, but it's going to take a coming together between national governments and Europe. And I'm not sure if that happens very well at the moment.
Well, let's get Isidro to react to that. Isidro, as Enda said there, you know, everyone's doing their best, but at the end of the day, rural Europe is being left behind. And he said the rural agenda needs to match the urban agenda. Do you think that the rural strategy does? I mean, what would you say to Enda there?
So I think that he's fully right, Enda is fully right on the perceptions, and that's why also for the first time we have a vice president of the commission taking care of this topic. That has never been the case. This was always part of the agriculture thing. But we are now with the commission of van der Leyen realizing that rural is more than agriculture, and of course connectivity is an important part here. The long-term vision of rural areas is a first step in the right direction. I think we all agree on that, but it's only the beginning of the journey. As Enda very rightly said, we need to get the actions together of all the players. And that's not only national, but also regional, and also the corporates and the business people. So here, I always like to touch on concrete things, no? So here about how bringing all these people together, we in this pilot project of the Startup Village, we talked to the regions why you didn't intervene on helping this to provide funding for the connectivity, and they said to us, well, we were not sure if this was going to be allowed by Brussels, by us, no? And I asked them, but did you ever ask for that? No, we just thought that would not fit into the rural development or the cohesion funds regulation, no? When this would have perfectly fitted, no? So then in the first action on this Startup Villages Forum will be to provide, first to define what is a Startup Village, to differentiate with ongoing activities like smart villages, and the second thing that we are going to do beyond the conceptualization is to prepare a kind of guidelines for the regions to see how they can use in the best possible way their cohesion funds, together with other funds like Horizon Europe, etc., Erasmus+, to support the innovation in rural areas. And here I have to say that I'm very confident that these guidelines could have a dramatic effect. Because when I talk to all the regions, everywhere in Europe, being policy decision makers or being the actual persons with the pain, they all want to help, but most of the time they don't know how. They are used to spend the cohesion funds on big infrastructure projects. And of course, you don't need these big budgets for one small village. You want to build there a co-working space, or you want to bring a fiber to the home when the fiber is already in the center of the village. Is not so much money that you need to put on the table. No, so it's a challenge also we need to realize it's a challenge for the civil servants who have to prepare the call for tenders and all the other operational programs to spend that money. So those guidelines will be, in my opinion, will be extremely important to support the regions and to enable the regions to be able to support the rural regions, as in many cases they want to do.
Okay, Isidro, thanks for that. Now I have a couple of questions coming in from the audience, so thank you so much for those questions. When you do leave a question or comment, just remind us where you're joining us from. That would be great, so we can say that, and of course your name if you'd like to give us that information. Before I bring in those questions though, Reinald, I have a question for you, and that is about the COVID pandemic and how that's been impacting our livelihoods, and how some people have actually been changing and lifting their whole family and going out to live rurally. Have you seen trends like this, and can you visualize one day in Europe little mini kind of Silicon Valley style hubs around the continent? You're on mute, Reinald, by the way. Yep. Reinald Kruger, off you go. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah,
Reinald.
I think you can hear me. Yeah.
Perfectly. Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the system who unmuted me. Sorry for that. No, great question. Clearly, we have seen trends, and if you just look at demand during the pandemic, we have demand increases by 70% and more, 70. And that was not in the urban areas, it was mainly also in the rural areas. So we have clearly seen a tendency for people to replace the normal way of working, educating themselves or children, just communicating, connecting. And we had to react to that. So we had to invest quite a lot during the pandemic in the first phase in order to get our networks running and coping with this demand. And I have to say that cooperation there with organizations such as the Commission, with national governments, local authorities have been very helpful indeed. So everybody saw very quickly, we have to do something very urgently so that people can cope with this situation. I think we'll have discussed the long-term vision for rural areas. That is clearly very much welcomed by us. So we welcome the Commission's initiative. And it is never too late. We have in particular a lot of sympathy for the four themes, the four priority areas. So stronger, connected, resilient, and prosperous rural areas. That is what we have to achieve. I would say to what Isidro mentioned, the lack of information by a lot of people actually active in the rural areas is an issue. And there I think businesses like ours have to play their part. So we cannot leave that only to the authorities alone. We have to help educating as well, informing what is possible and what can we achieve together. Final point I would like to make is in those areas, and let me pick an Irish example, because I've been there and have seen that, how transformational connectivity can be. Vodafone brought up together with local authorities and partners a hub in Skibbereen in West Cork. And when you see how this community has developed since then, you see what the potential is. It is not only about connecting people, it is about how do we enable businesses, industry to go there and bring the jobs to the people. So it's not about people going away, finding jobs. It's about bringing jobs there because you make a place attractive, livable again. And you see also people who, in Skibbereen, for example, I have talked to people who moved from California to West Cork because they said, it's much nicer here than in California. We would like to work here, and now with the hub, we can do that. So you see, this is what connectivity is about, bringing rural areas a chance to participate in the industrial and business growth as well.
Skibberey, not a bad place to work from, indeed. A good example there. Thank you so much, Reinald Kruger, for that. And now I've got a really interesting question from a viewer, from Antonio Hyder, which will make us all think a little bit outside the box. He says, have you, the panelists, taken into account resistance to adoption of technologies and people living in rural areas? He says, I see this every single day. How are you going to work around that behavioral change? And actually, Antonio, I think of my dad when I read that question. He can barely send a WhatsApp. He still drives his car. He doesn't want to ride a bike. He's afraid of the green digital transition that we keep reporting about here on Euronews constantly. So I guess, how are you going to work around that behavioral change? The people who don't want to move on and don't want to see so much change so fast. And maybe Mariya Graça Carvalho, we get your take on that. Portuguese MEP from the European People's Party. Mariya?
Yeah. Actually, in Portugal, we don't see a lot of these. Portugal is a country where people adapt quite well, and they like probably because we had a very difficult life until quite recently. We are happy to receive new technologies, new ideas that make our life better.
Even among the older, among the older population, are older people tech savvy? Your older voters?
Yes. Especially the older population, because they remember well how difficult was life before the revolution, before 74, that we were a very poor country. And for example, that is one of the reasons that we are the country that has already 85% of the population full vaccinated. Everyone wanted the vaccine. We were queues for the vaccine because we remember the problems that we had with tuberculosis and the poliomyelitis and everything, and how the vaccines save us. So we are quite open to things that will improve and will bring a better life. But I think that it's not the same in all the countries in Europe, and some of the countries where even without using having these new technology, life is quite pleasant, and the rural areas are very pleasant places. They tend to probably not to be so open to new technologies. I don't see this problem in Portugal. But let me also draw the attention for another fact that makes this divide between urban and rural areas. The population and the votes are in the urban areas in most of the countries. Portugal has the most of the population located near the sea, in the big cities, we are not a big country. It is 120 kilometers, but the voters, the decision of the elections are in the big Lisbon, Porto, Braga, Setúbal. They decide. So there is big plans, very nice plans for the recovery plan, but the first projects that have been announced are in Porto and Lisbon. Again, bridge, the underground. So we are afraid that in the end is the national politicians, even with very nice strategies for the rural area, they will decide where the votes are. And that is something that for the European Commission that is not under this pressure to be quite monitoring the use of the regional funds and of the resilience and recovery plan to make sure that these objectives that we have of cohesion and to have to reduce the gap between the urban and rural and the digitalization will be a fact. Because if we don't monitoring and we not follow it very close, it will happen the same. The big investment will go for the areas where are the voters, and the big cities we will profit from the recovery plan.
Okay, thanks, Mariya. Really interesting perspective there, and good to know there's no digital dinosaurs among your voters in Portugal. Enda, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
I would like just to briefly to get your take on Antonio's question.
But yeah, I just want to fully agree with Mariya Reid, the national governments and where the votes are, particularly in Ireland. Like the east coast of Ireland is highly populated, where the west coast isn't. And while we have lovely plans, and I agree with the Commission, those plans are there. European Commission have got to come in and tell national governments, like, you know, it has got to go not alone where the votes are, but right across where there are people, right, that might not have the population, might be able to elect as many members as the eastern coast of Ireland. Like, I am a farmer. I am a small farmer as such, like most farmers in the west of Ireland. We absolutely need digital training. Most farmers need digital training. It has got to happen, because if I have a calf born in the morning, I have to go online and register that calf, you know, for traceability and everything. That's how the rules are. How can we do this? In rural Ireland, in this past week, 80 of our banks closed in small villages and towns. Now, what is that saying to rural Ireland? 80 banks, where the people deal with every day. They closed their doors and walked away where the bigger population are. We can't continue to let this happen. And I know I don't want to be going on about this, but it's a fact that has got to be brought home to somebody. You know, they have got to realize that this is happening.
I guess, and I mean, Isidro, I mean, what would you say to that? I mean, you don't have a magic wand to solve every single problem.
I know. I don't want to be giving out to him. I'm not giving out to him.
But I think they have a big role in monitoring the use of the funds. That is a big role of the Commission, and has a lot of power and support of the European Parliament to monitoring if the member states are applying where they said, and along the lines that will be set by the Commission. On the digitalization and the green transition, cohesion, regional cohesion. So there is a big power that the Commission has. So he has to use it.
So you have to use it, Isidro. What do you say to that? And then, Reinald, I'd like to get your take.
So MEP Carvalho is fully right. We have this group with all the member states, with the DG ECFIN, in which we are monitoring the work that they are doing, what they promise in the reforms and the expenditure of the money, of the national recovery plans. We are also going to set up, in collaboration with the Knowledge for Innovation Forum of the European Parliament that Mariya is sharing. We are thinking, we are not going yet, but we are considering to do something on the area of innovation, a particular group with them, that this comes from a workshop that they organized in June with the 10 member states, and they all were happy to share best practices on how best to spend the money of the national recovery plans in innovation. So why not? We could consider something specific for rural areas as well. So these are just ideas I'm floating. We have this capacity to do that. The official one, the formal one, is the one I mentioned at the beginning. That is the one that is monitoring all the programs. But why not? There is a demand, and we see the value there. We could organize some more kind of informal type of groups with member states in particular areas where they might be interested to share best practices. As I said, it's just an idea that came from an activity organized by the European Parliament, and as always, Commissioner Gabriel is always very supportive of all the ideas from the European Parliament. And we have been working on that since that moment. And yesterday precisely I was talking with Roland, the one leading the Knowledge for Innovation, about some ideas on implementing that. So we will try our best. It's true, as you said, that there are some in some parts of Euro resistance, maybe not so much to the technology as such, so to using GSMs or to use iPhones. My mother is 85 years old, living in a village, and she's using that, and she's doing WhatsApp with us. So I don't think that's nowadays a big issue. But it's true that there is some reluctance from them to believe that this is just another media or PR exercise, public relationship exercise. No? And this is coming back again to this pilot of the startup villages. One of the mayors was very reluctant to believe that this was going to be just a PR exercise. Vice President Suiza went to visit them, etc. And still they were very, very, very reluctant. So we need to recognize this, the fact that the people living in rural areas, they have the perception, I will not say it's true, but they have the perception that they have not been considered, and they may have the perception now that we are just doing this just for the PR, no, for the media. And this, I can tell you certainly from the side of the Commissioner Gabriel and all the commissioners, this is not the case. We are taking this very seriously. But of course, we need to demonstrate this to them with facts, with concrete actions. That's why at the beginning of July, end of June, the long-term vision for rural area was announced. Already on the 16th of November, we are launching one of these initiatives, the Startup Villages Forum. There will be more launching in the coming, and we are very realistic as well. So we are not coming with grandeur type of projects that will be implemented in 5 stages from now, if ever. We are being realistic. Let's say we already had the MFF approved for the next 7 years, so we are not going to move the financial framework for the EU. So we need to use what is already there. That's why, for example, instead of promising a fund for rural innovation, what we are doing is providing these guidelines so that all the regions can use the existing cohesion funds to do rural innovation is so they want. So we are taking, I think it's something also good, that we are not taking a grandeur approach, but we are taking a more nitty-gritty approach, a very realistic and pragmatic approach to help the regions that in many cases they want to do it, because as Mariya correctly said, the boats are not in the rural areas, the boats are in the cities, but at the same time, the regions, there are many rural regions that depend very much the share of the boats on the rural areas in that region. And these regions, they have normally a lot of power on deciding where they want to spend the money from the cohesion funds. So then, of course, I'm not expecting Lisbon, our friend Carlos Moedas or Madrid to spend money in that. That's okay. But the regions, Castilla and León, for example, they could do it. And they are the ones, at least in the case of Spain, who are fully 100% autonomous on spending that money under the rules of the European of the EU. So those regions who are in charge of this money and who have a big percentage of voters in rural areas, in those regions, I believe we can really see an impact.
I'm glad, Isidro, you're sounding urgent, because of course it's urgent, isn't it? I mean, as Enda said, he needs to fill out those digital papers now as a farmer, and these are things that he cannot do. And COVID-19 and the pandemic, of course, served as a good wake-up call to the Commission, to policymakers, and of course to the continent about our dependency on being connected. Reinald, we're kind of running out of time, but I want to bring you in still, and I also want to bring in Sandra. Reinald, what role could Vodafone play in these digital trainings, do you think?
Yeah, I think we agree it's urgent. We agree there's a digital skills gap, in particular in rural areas, and it is not surprising because when you look at the fact that 40% of the population in rural areas in Europe still has no fast broadband connection, it is then also difficult to acquire to gain the digital skills necessary. We can, of course, in particular, by investing in rural areas and in networks in rural, contribute to minimize the gap. We have seen already good, I think, experienced progress in Germany, Italy, Spain, based on what is available as funds. And I think if we all take that together very seriously, building back better, then we can address what Enda has so clearly pointed out. Building back better in the sense that we improve the situation we had before the pandemic. Now with the funds available, both at EU level but also at member state level, we can invest in the networks, in rural in particular. As I said, some countries are doing that very quickly already, but also address the digital skills gap, and there companies like ours have to contribute, have to offer services sometimes for free, as we have been doing at the beginning of the pandemic, as part of a 5-point plan. So I think we have to continue just to come together, speak about what's the issues and where everybody involved can help best.
And 2025 will be here around the corner because time is flying. So I'm curious, we should all meet up again and see what progress has been made. Sandra, I think I'll leave the final comment to you. I want to get your thoughts on, Antonio Hyder's question there. Excuse me, and excuse me for my husky voice today. I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat. About this idea of people resisting to adopting technology, especially people in rural areas. What would you tell them? Like, how can technology change their life for the better?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because we have not seen this reluctancy, but I think it's important to make clear the use cases and how the technology will benefit them. In our experience, for example, as I mentioned, it's also an issue of making them participating, so making the end users participating in the design of the solution. And also, just to give you an example on the need to to adapt the technologies, we are beginning just this month a project with a technology center in Aragon here in Spain to explore how we can best adapt and facilitate the adoption of some deep tech. It's artificial intelligence applied to stock and logistics management. And I think that's a very important step, is to research and to interview the users and to see how can these tools be adapted to the particular needs that might be to those to big companies using these solutions. So I would say participation and making the use case clear to beneficiaries.
Hey, Sandra, Isabel Novoconte, thank you so much for your intervention. And thank you to the rest of our panelists. It's just 12:30. We've just 2 minutes past 12:30. So I know you're all busy people. So I want to thank so much all our panelists for being with us today. And of course, all our viewers. We had a couple more questions. We can come to you maybe after the event to follow up with them. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Mariya de Graça Carvalho, Portuguese member of the European Parliament from the European People's Party, not the Socialist Group. Excuse me for my mistake. Thanks also to Isidro there in the European Commission, Isidro Laso Ballesteros, senior member of the Cabinet of the European Commissioner for Innovation and Education, Mariya Gabriel. Thank you so much. Great to get your insights. And we'll keep an eye on that startup village and the presentation that you mentioned coming up a little bit later in the autumn. Thanks also to Reinhold Kruger, super interesting there to get your take, Group Policy Development Director from Vodafone Group. And thanks to Enda Stenson over in Leitrim. He's, of course, the Rapporteur for the revitalisation of rural areas through smart villages. He was representing today the European Committee of the region. So thank you guys all for being with us today, and thank you all to all the organisers of today's event for making this happen. And stay in touch, and we'll see how this rural strategy develops over the next couple of weeks and years. All the best. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.